It is Locked On Jazz for the 14th of January. First trade in the NBA has gone down. Other than the fact that the Knicks can't draft, what does it mean? The Eric Paschall play of late, is it sustainable in some way to be a part of a rotation? And it's a points game Friday. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you for making Locked On Jazz your first listen every day. We greatly appreciate it. We are free and available on all platforms. In fact, if you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, you can subscribe right now. Hit that little bell button, be notified every time we drop a show. And if you're just listening on your regular, good old-fashioned, all-American podcast player, please follow, leave a 5-star review if you want. Good morning to Hayden, Christopher, Mark, Bryce, T-Man, and Tucker, who are all tuned in on our live show so far in the early morning. A little earlier than usual. We're going to surprise a few people. Ray's going to wake up. Lacey's going to wake up and be like, what happened? Where did Locked On go? Early edition. Wife and daughter left early today for a golf tournament in Southern California, and so I was awake and might as well do the show. Didn't do my hair, though, you can see. All right. The first trade went down. Cam Reddish, who, if you're not familiar with, was a early draft pick of the Atlanta Hawks a few years ago, the 10th pick of the 2019 draft. And in 3 seasons, Cam Reddish is shooting 39% from the field and 33% from three, averaging about 10, 11 points. Hasn't turned out to be kind of the elite athlete people hoped he would be. Reminds me a little bit of Justice Winslow. And so they moved him. There's 2 things here that I think are interesting. Next year, this kind of player is going to be even more interesting because of the fact that the Elijah Hughes, Udoka Azubuike draft class, so 2 second-year players, lost so much. They lost an entire draft preparation. They lost training camp. They lost summer league. They lost training camp. They lost G League. And now this year, they have their first year, but even that's now kind of being screwed up a little bit. For Cam Reddish, I don't know how much COVID mattered here, but it is interesting to look at him just from this standpoint. He played 58 games his rookie year because I don't remember if Atlanta went to the bubble, but I don't think so. And then last year, in the midst of just kind of a crazy COVID season, he never gets his footing. He only plays 26 games. And this year he's played 34. He's actually better this year. So it's an interesting, how COVID is going to impact the development of players and whether they all develop later and whether or not some teams actually end up making mistakes would, I think, be a storyline here that's worth discussing. I haven't heard a lot of. But the thing is, okay, so a 6'8", 220-pound wing, which is, they're everything in this league right now, who went to the same school, by the way, as Lamar Stevens, the Haverford School in Haverford, Pennsylvania. Just only reason I know that is because I looked up Lamar Stevens, who was killing us the other night. What's he worth? So a poor shooting, and what the Hawks got for him were 3 things. They got a first-round draft pick that's protected in the top 15. So you almost could call it half a pick. It's likely to come to fruition because it's Charlotte's pick, and Charlotte's going to be a playoff team. And so in all likelihood, it will be in the 20s, and they'll get it because Charlotte should. It's top 18 protected this season, which maybe Charlotte gets in out of. I'm not sure. And then it's 16, and then it's 14, and then it becomes 2 seconds. So I think the chances are that they will likely be a playoff team in the next 3 seasons, and so therefore they'll get a 15, 20 pick. So they also got a little luxury cap freedom, and they got Kevin Knox, who's been another New York Knicks draft bust. The New York Knicks, by the way, this is truly incredible, have not signed a first-round draft pick to a second contract since 1994. That's insane. Since 1994, the Knicks have not signed any of their players to a second contract. So we'll see. One other they didn't get Atlanta didn't get any money. They just got luxury tax because they exchanged money. Kevin Knox is this kind of similar player but he's a little further along in the contract status. And so it's, I think I doubt Atlanta ever does anything with Kevin Knox. He's in his fourth year, so his thing's up. He's 37%, 35% from three, and he's 6'7", 215. So it's these like great bodies that haven't developed. So it's like Reddish earned you half a first round. Now, what does that tell you about like an established player like a Jeremy Grant or, a Marcus Smart or players of that sort that we've heard Jazz fans talking about? Jeremy Grant, everyone kind of is talking as though Detroit will likely get 2 first-round picks for Jeremy Grant. Well, that gets awfully hard for us because we have picks down the line. And frankly, there is a point in this process where you don't want to be giving up future draft picks for us. We could be at some point in time in a rebuild, and you don't want to be the Portland Trailblazers or the New Jersey Brooklyn Nets who give up the Damian Lillard pick to the Portland Trailblazers in a quest to go get Gerald Wallace, I think it was, who turned, really mundane player. And that's the Dame Lillard trade. You've got to make sure you don't do that. So when you look at, and this trade would lead me to believe that if a player who's not particularly good in Cam Reddish yields you a little luxury tax space and kind of half a draft pick, that seems that maybe the 2 first-round picks, or at least a young player and 2 first-round picks, might be real for someone like a Jeremy Grant or maybe a Marcus Smart or somebody who actually has some value to that. So I think it's at least an interesting little note kind of to keep an eye on, that trade follows through to kind of the model that everyone thinks that those players are going to get. Yield you 2 first-round picks, and I think first two-round picks is awfully hard for us to do. In fact, I don't think we can do it. And then I just don't know, young player. Well, we can give in Jared Butler. Like, we love Jared Butler, but I'm not sure the NBA does because he went 40th in the draft. So the last chance that the NBA had to grab Jared Butler, 10 teams passed on him a second time. Like, let's be honest about that. Just from our draft capital, as much as we think Jared Butler's this young, rising, and he's shown some signs in preseason and occasionally in games that he really has a future and can do some things well, I don't think he's flipped the entire viewpoint of the league on him. And there were some medical issues there that are probably still prominent. I don't think they've disappeared. So I'm not sure that has huge value. The one I always think is interesting, by the way, on the Jared Butler end of things, is that Elijah Hughes was the 39th pick of the draft. Like, I think they're very similar in kind of where they are in their development because Hughes lost that year. And Elijah Hughes is a little bigger and has shown some signs that maybe, he's a pretty nice player. Little news notes here. Malik Fitz got waived. He had a broken wrist. He was a 2-way player. We need a roster spot. It's a bummer. It's interesting. He's got some really cool skills, but I'm not, and I liked him a lot, but I'm not sure, you have roster spots. I'm not sure it's a massively big deal. It's just a bummer. Interesting little note. Shams tweeted out that NBA has informed teams that daily COVID-19 testing for players, coaches, and Tier 1 personnel will not extend beyond Saturday, which is nice for me because I've been tested every single day and it will not. So that's kind of cool. Individuals will remain subject to testing if symptomatic, exposed, or enhanced directed by league office. I don't mind being tested, frankly, but it is time. he sent out further clarification. Players who remain unvaccinated or eligible for booster will remain under daily surveillance and game day tested through February 17th. So, anyway, if you're, as I am, vaccinated and boosted in tier 1, and most of our players, I think most of the players, I don't know about our players, it also, some of that testing stops on Saturday. That we'll see. Obviously, if you get exposure, and we're probably in the midst of exposure, we'll probably still have to deal with some of that stuff. Interesting little notes. All right, Eric Paschall has played pretty well, so I thought we would talk a little bit about Eric Paschall coming up here. The show today is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. They do great work. The Murdoch family is just the best. I love Blake's approach to kind of the situation right now, which is, hey, we are not going to charge you more than MSRP under any circumstance. We are not going to gouge you. We are not going to take advantage of the market to make a few extra $1,000. So the second thing that's super cool about what Blake had to say about it is that they are actually finally getting cars in. So some of the incoming cars, this was as of December 10th, so this is about a month ago, but they were all going to be here by February 5th. It was 13 Sonatas, 6 Elantras, 25 Santa Fe's, 32 Tucsons with the new body style, 9 Santa Cruzes, 14 Palisades, 2 Velosters, 8 Ioniq hybrids, and 11 Konas. So fabulous. Go check it out. At Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Linden and in Logan. If you would like to, all you've got to do is email me first, and I'll set up a meeting for you, VIP meeting. So feel free to just email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Built Bar. Raspberry cheesecake, white chocolate raspberry cheesecake is the special flavor that just arrived. Surprise, surprise. Ruby chocolate is still available. That's one of their puffs. Their puffs are just stunningly good. And the coconut brownie chunk is my favorite. Caramel almond delight is the favorite of my partner. And it is Built, the the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar with incredible macros, with only 130 calories, 2.5 fat grams, 4 net carbs, 4 sugars, 17 grams of protein. It is the protein bar that tastes like candy bar. If you're trying to get over that little holiday hump, put the Built bars where all your other little secret stashes are. And instead of having the bad secret stash, have the Built bar instead and help you in the process. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15. That's LOCK15 to help you out and get you a Built bar and help you with the little dietary things with fun chocolate Built bars to make you feel better. LOCK15. All right, I want to talk about Eric Paschall. Because somebody asked me the other day if he could be a secondary rim defender. I want to dig into that concept too. So the other day on the show, I brought up that I thought the future of the NBA is secondary rim defenders. And I felt this way for a while, and I still think it's true. I just don't think there's very many of them, is really what it comes down to. So that's probably the rub here, is that it's just really hard to find players that you would classify as secondary rim defenders. And I'll look at it here in a little bit and see if we can kind of determine if there are, who some of them are. So the reason is because as teams spread everyone out and widen the floor with 3-point shooting and then play 4 or 5 out, and if you can they pull Rudy to the wing, or Rudy has to rotate out to the corner and everyone's a good shooter at this point, and they drive by or they swing it, there's somebody else can get to the rim defensively. I think it really makes for a massive impact on the game. I think, when I look at the best defensive teams in the league, it's hard to tell, again, like who, like Kevin Durant was the greatest second rim defender along with Draymond Green. Like that's a great example of it. Often, by the way, shot blockers are way better if they're coming from the weak side. And you're not really always looking to be shot blockers. Phoenix has it a little bit with Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder, frankly. They're both pretty good little athletes coming in. Cleveland certainly has it with Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, and those are, and Boston's interesting. Robert Williams is really good, and then it's Tatum and Brown. They're super elite athletes, secondary rim defenders. Maybe the Clippers certainly have it with Paul George when he's healthy, or Nicholas Batum when he's active, and those are the 5 best defensive teams in the league. And there's something to that. And then, it has to really also get down to like, who are the best teams in the league at defending or denying the rim? Now, you can deny the rim, I think, the way the Jazz do, which is just by not letting people get to the rim. The 5 teams that don't let you get to the rim are Golden State, which is incredible, right? Because they have Andrew Wiggins as a secondary rim defender and Draymond Green. So it's a super athletic wing in a lot of cases. Boston, Phoenix, Utah, we're doing it without one, and New Orleans. So interesting that New Orleans is able to deny you at the rim. And then the teams that were shooting at the rim, Cleveland, multiple rim defenders. New York, that's a surprise to me. I wouldn't think of anyone in that group. Memphis, just incredibly athletic group, but if they're playing Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson is certainly a secondary rim defender. San Antonio is a surprise to me. I think that just might be structure of how they play. And they allow the most mid-range shots. So in highest percentage, San Antonio really is just a team that sits at the rim. And then Chicago is another one that surprised me. Look, because I don't think of maybe I don't really think of Zach being anything defensively, and so I have a hard time thinking about that. If we look, one way to try to figure out if there are secondary rim defenders is somebody who is I can look in the tracking thing that we always look at for about Rudy Gobert and find the defensive, the defensive numbers on that. And I don't know that this is the best way to look at it. It's frankly the best I've come up with. Might be a better way to say it because, looking inside 6 feet at who's defending shots, and one of the reasons Chicago seems to be good is Vukovic is defending the most, and Pirtle. So here's San Antonio, and then Mobley, and then Gobert, and then Jokic. So Toronto's got Scotty Barnes. He's defending 7 shots a night at the rim. Everyone else here is a center. So of all the top 15 guys that are defending shots at the rim, almost all of them are centers. So Pirtle, Embiid, Mobley, Gobert, Jokic, Anthony Davis, Miles Turner, Daniel Gafford in Washington, Clint Capella in Atlanta, Mason Plumlee in Charlotte, Pascal Siakam sort of plays center, Jared Allen, DeAndre Ayton, Domantas Sabonis. Here's an interesting one. DeJounte Murray. DeJounte Murray is defending 6 shots a night at the rim. Teams are shooting 4 percentage points less. That is a secondary rim defender. That's why he's an elite defensive player. You wouldn't think of. Lonzo Ball, 6 at the rim, nights at the rim, 6 percentage points below average. Okay, well, there's suddenly Chicago and San Antonio, who I couldn't really describe. Now we begin to learn why. Because suddenly they have these players. More centers. Stunningly, Fred VanVleet is in it. This has to probably do with the defensive style of Toronto, the fact that we now have 3 players in there. Giannis is an unbelievable example. Obviously, if you have Brook Lopez and Giannis, that's the best secondary rim defender. Charlotte has Miles Bridges. So Charlotte has bad centers, but it's interesting to see 2 of their players in the top group here. Cade Cunningham, Paul George, who we mentioned already. Cade Cunningham's interesting to see in there. It's a good sign for his athleticism. Derek White is surprisingly really good at the rim. 11 percentage points below league average as a defensive player. Derek White's a player that I wonder, 27 years old, I wonder what San Antonio's doing with him. He kind of fits what we do. Would he be, is he less expensive? That would be an interesting one. He's sneaky athletic, sneaky good block defender around the rim, sneaky good guard defender. That's an interesting name to me, Derek White. And defending 5 shots a night at the rim. Josh Giddey floats in here. Buddy Hield surprisingly floats in here at 5. Now we're into kind of wing players. Jaren Jackson, 5 a game. Anthony Edwards. Jaren Jackson holds field at 15 percentage points below their league average when they're at the rim. He's 6'10". That's awesome. Buddy Hield, but he's not good at it. Tobias Harris. Buddy Hield actually almost looks like he just rotates and doesn't have an impact on it. Kyle Kuzma could possibly be a little bit of that guy as well in Washington. And the final group I mentioned, Andrew Wiggins pops in here. An interesting name from a trade standpoint, but I think he's a 2 first-round pick guy, is Harrison Barnes. He's defending 5 shots a night at the rim, right about league average. Kristaps Porzingis only defends 5 shots a night at the rim, despite the fact what Patrick Beverley has to say. Sorry, cheap shot. And Andrew Wiggins defends 5 a night at 4, holding people to 4 points below average. So those are probably, they're statistically the best guys I could come up with our secondary rim defenders have an impact. Jason Tatum should be more of one in Boston, frankly. And, on the other end, we didn't see a single player from Utah in that mention, right? There wasn't, other than Rudy Gobert. Our guys are just not secondary rim defenders. If you look at the inside 6 feet, Rudy's defending 8 shots a game, Royce at 4, Whiteside at 4, Mike Conley at 3 with limited impact, Donovan Mitchell at 3 with negative impact, 9 points better than the league average, Boyan 3, Jordan Clarkson with 3, Rudy Gay with 2. I mean, sometimes that's just being around Rudy, right, of what you're seeing there. So that's kind of the interesting way to look at it. Can Eric Paschall be that guy? And the answer is no. He doesn't block shots. He doesn't impact shots. But can Eric Paschall play more is an interesting question. His three-point shooting is still just really suspect. Right? He's a career 30% three-point shooter, and he hit some shots the other night. He was in 2 of 7 in Toronto. He is showing what he had at Fordham and what he had at Villanova, which is this really powerful, short, 15-foot isolation game where you can get to the rim on switches and do some things of that nature. So, yes, somebody asked whether or not he could play with Rudy Gay, and I think the answer is probably yes, but you're really not spaced. They can probably play together. You're not getting spacing, though. Make sure you understand that. Paschall will go unguarded if we're playing him regularly because he's a 30% three-point shooter, and so he does take away space, and he's not a rim roller in any way, so he doesn't have vertical stretch or rim stretching, vertical spacing and power at the rim the way Whiteside and Gobert do. So, and he's 6'6", right? He's really short. So he's super big. He's really, really good in isolation. But, those are some areas where I think it would be tough for him to play that way. He played 65% of his minutes at center last year, largely playing in place of Draymond Green. So it's really hard to tell whether it was good or bad. Also because of the fact that the Warriors were so bad without Draymond on the floor because Draymond's that great. But to Paschall's credit, the one thing that's very consistent in his career is he's super rim finisher. 71% for his career as a rim finisher. And so, yes, he does have a little bad game. If teams are switching us 1 through 5, I think he is someone who actually can become really valuable. They're switching 1 through 5, and you end up taking him to 15, 16 feet and letting him power through. He's been able to do it both on big guys as well as little guys. So I think that's an interesting little note on Paschall. And that's where I do think he can play more. And defensively, he battles and he brings a toughness. He's an okay rebounder. He's probably a good rebounder for a guy who's 6'6" and a bad rebounder for a center. So it depends how you want to look at it. But he really is not a great rebounder. His defensive rebounding percentage is 10%, 11%, which means he has the same, if everyone had equal distribution along the way as a rebounder, they'd all be at 10%. And he's at 11. So anyway, that's a thought on that. All right, Points Gained is next here on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline.ag. You're going to get into the action and play this weekend, Super Wild Card Weekend. 50% welcome bonus with the promo code Locked On. Here's the lines on the NFL games this week. Saturday, Bengals 5.5-point favorite over the Raiders. I listened to the Locked On crossover edition between Bengals and Raiders, some interesting matchups there. Bills are a 4-point favorite over the Patriots. Joe Marino's doing a great job on Locked On Bills. Congratulations to him on his new book. So make sure you go grab that. Crossovers, if you're a football fan, we do crossovers on every single, which means both the hosts back and forth. They're just terrific. And they were yesterday. So go grab them. They're in my Twitter feed also. Tampa Bay's an 8.5-point favorite over the Eagles. Cowboys 3-point favorite over the Niners. I'll probably listen to that crossover today on the way to the mountain. Kansas City's a 12.5-point favorite over the Steelers. And then Monday night, the Rams, a 4-point favorite over against the is it Arizona? I think it is. I just switched off the page. NBA futures. What do we got for player futures? Who are the awards? Is everyone still giving Billy Donovan as coach of the year plus 325, tied with J.D. Bickerstaff? Taylor Jenkins, one of the best coaches in the league, making a run at 425. Steve Kerr, 475. And Monty Williams at 4 next. Steph Curry, still your MVP. Warriors have lost 5 of 8, by the way. Plus 140. Durant, then Giannis, then Ja, and then Nikola Jokic. Jokic should be the MVP. Well, he's the best player. If Russell Westbrook's going to win that MVP a few years ago, then he should do it. Promo code LOCKEDON gets you 50% welcome bonus. All right, let's do Points Gained. All right, I now know what everyone wants to know. So I just do it right off the shoot. Since I just said that Derek White's a really interesting possibility, let's go look at his points gained. Negative 0.4. So below league average offensive player, doesn't quite fit my model of wanting everybody to be positive. But minus 0.4, taking 35% of the shots as threes, going to free throw line 10% of the time. He is shooting 29% from three this year, which seems to be a little bit of an outlier for him. All right, points gained is our offensive metric that judges offensive players and their efficiency and their impact on the game. So the idea is, oh, shoot. I made a big mistake today that I'll have to fix. I put all of our notes into the 17-18 season by accident. I did not mean to do that. The idea is you use a certain amount of scoring opportunities on a given night. What do you do instead of compared to a league average player? So, for example, last year in the 2021 season, the number one player was Steph Curry. He used 24 scoring opportunities a night, and he scored 4 points more than an average players would with those 28 possessions. Kevin Durant used 20 scoring possessions. And average players who use those scoring possessions, Kevin Durant scored 3.8 points more. Zion Williamson was next at 3.2. Nikola Jokic was fourth at 3.1. Every year there's usually 3 players that are over 3 or so. Last year there were 4. And then there's about 10 players that are over 2. The big takeaways we have had over the years on this are twofold. One, negative players are much more bad or have much larger negative impact on your team than anyone realizes. See Russell Westbrook, though he's not as bad this year. And number 2 is that the goal is to have a team that is everybody's above average. So if you take the ball out of the hands of one of your primary scorers and they move it to another guy, that they're still average. So that's the premise. So let's look at the Utah Jazz at this point and see where they sit. The Utah Jazz, points gained. Rudy Gobert is 3.6, number 2 in the entire NBA. There's a trend this year where big guys are more important than ever before. This is because of the fact that teams are defending the rim better, players are getting fouled less, and going to the line more, and so suddenly the dunkers are way more important. The most impactful offensive player in the league right now is Jared Allen. No one can figure out why Cleveland's so good. Jared Allen is largely the reason. No one can ever figure out why the Jazz have been so good. Rudy Gobert's offense is actually the reason. Bojan Bogdanovic is having an unbelievable year at a 1.9. He's almost in that 2 range, which is really elite. For a player to be at 2 or above is elite. So tip of the hat there. He's having a much better year. We're probably not talking about him enough. Hassan Whiteside, 1.2. Mike Conley, 1.0. That's a big jump for Mike. That's great. Royce, 0.9. Good for him. Elijah's 0.7. Donovan Mitchell is 0.6. That is better than Donovan has ever been. And a great sign for the Jazz. Eric Paschall's 0.3. Joe Ingles, 0.3. Rudy Gay, 0.2. Everybody positive. You got to love it. The only guy who's not positive is Jordan Clarkson, minus 1.2. And the problem with minus 1.2, just to think about this for a second. So Jordan goes minus 1.2. This is where the premise that negative players are far more negative than you'd ever realize. Or, it's negative efficiency players have a far more bigger negative impact than you would realize. Is that for as great as Donovan is on a given night compared to average players, he's 0.6. Jordan's minus 1.2. So suddenly, the positive that Donovan gives you, Jordan takes away. Mike Conley's 1.0. Jordan's minus 1.2. Like, Mike Conley's positive is just taken away. So that's a big deal. For us to have a negative 1.2 player and the number 1 offense in the league is really remarkable. Let's look at what's happened. There's a very interesting trend here. Let's take a look at our Western Conference foes. We'll look at Phoenix, Golden State, and Memphis today. Phoenix, DeAndre Ayton's 2.4, JaVale McGee's 1.7. They've bought into this idea that they want another big center dunking with Chris Paul. That's smart. Bismarck, Cameron, whoever's played center has been great for them because Chris Paul's a master. Cameron Johnson, 1.1. Mikal Bridges, 1.1. Chris Paul, 0.2. Devin Booker's not having a great year, minus 0.2. The mascot's really bothering him. Jay Crowder, minus 0.2. Landry Shamet, minus 0.3. Abdul Nader, minus 0.7. Cameron Payne minus 1.6. That's troubling to me about where Phoenix is. That's interesting. They were not that way a year ago. So that tells me, like, let's keep an eye on Phoenix. That should come back together. Golden State Warriors, Gary Payton minus 1 or plus 1.8. Steph Curry 1.6, down a lot. Their offense hasn't been great. Wiggins 0.9, amazing turnaround for him. Jordan Poole plus 0.7. Otto Porter plus 0.4. Draymond plus 0.3. Nima Bjelica plus 0.1. Damon Lee plus 0.1. Toscana Anderson even. Kevon Looney even. Everyone is even. That's it. That's the perfect team. Wild card. Klay Thompson is minus 2.2. Keep an eye on it. Klay Thompson is using 16 scoring opportunities tonight. This is not going to go over as swimmingly great as everybody wants to make it sound. So keep an eye on that. But that's why Golden State's been great, because everything's average and then their defense is superb. So look at Memphis, who's now ahead of us in the standings. Brandon Clark 1.5. Desmond Bain 1.0. Ja Morant 0.7. John Conchor 0.7. Tyus Jones 0.3. Steven Adams 0.1. Now, this is interesting because they're not a great offensive team. Xavier Williams, who they're playing, minus 0.6. Jaren Jackson, minus 0.7. Kyle Anderson, minus 0.8. D'Anthony Melton, minus 1.1. Dylan Brooks is always negative, minus 1.3. Ja Morant, 0.7 is incredible. So, interesting little thing to look at there. Brooklyn, if they get everybody positive around their 3 stars, lights out, party's over. Durant's 3.3, Nicholas Claxton's 1.5, Harden's 1.4, Harris 1.4, LaMarcus Aldridge 1.2, Patty Mills 0.8, Bembry 0.7. Where's Harden? Oh, I had 1.2. Kyrie's minus 1 right now. Paul Millsap, Blake Griffin, they've got it. It's going to be hard to beat. All right, let's look at the league as a whole. Jared Allen is number 1 in the league at 3.8. Rudy Gobert 3.6. Kevin Durant 3.3, best offensive player, self-created. Nikola Jokic, 3.2. LeBron, 3.2. Unbelievable, because he had gone every other direction in his trend. LeBron was completely doing this with his trend. Karl Anthony Towns, Rashawn Holmes, Montrezl Harrell, heck of a teammate. Thomas Bryant, 2.8. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 2.8. Domantas Sabonis, 2.7. Worth noting in the trade. Robert Williams, 2.5. Okongwu in Atlanta, got it right today, 2.5. Playing really well. DeAndre Ayton, 2.4. Zach LaVine, 2.4. John Collins, 2.2. Mitchell Robinson, 2.2. Daniel Gafford, 2.1. Seth Curry, 2.0. Joel Embiid, 2.0. Boyan, 1.9. Pretty awesome. Who are the lowest? There are 500 and something like 90 players now that have played in the NBA this year. Like, my spreadsheet is mammoth. Lowest in the league that are actually playing. This is kind of weird because there's so many players. Jalen Suggs has been out for a while. They're always rookies. Isaiah Thomas was down here when he was playing. Brandon Goodwin, who we saw for a minute for Cleveland, who doesn't usually play. Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Dante DiVincenzo has not gotten right yet this year. Reggie Jackson having a terrible year for the Clippers. Josh Giddey. Klay Thompson, we mentioned. Kevin Porter, bad year, and he's never been efficient. Langston Galloway, DeJounte Murray, for all his great defense, is a minus 2.1 offensive player. That's bad. Cade minus 2, and he's long in the league, minus 2 point. Nikola Vucevic is a minus 2.0. If he gets right, keep an eye on Chicago even more than they already are. Russell's a minus 2.0 now, so he's bringing it down to where he usually is. He's not quite as bad as he was a year ago. Cleveland should be able to survive Ricky Rubio if they can get adequate play out of Rajon Rondo, because Ricky Rubio is a minus 1.9. Julius Randle is a minus 1.8. Clarkson, by the way, has gotten way better. Clarkson was in this group earlier. C.J. McCollum, interestingly, is a minus 1.4. Luka Doncic, a minus 1.3 this year. So some interesting numbers in there. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. A lot of geeky point game stuff. Thanks, everybody, for joining live. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a wonderful weekend. Jazz Denver Sunday. Enjoy playoff weekend. Have a great one. Talk to you soon. Thanks for making us your first listen. And now go listen to Locked On Now with Kim Becker and find out, plus all the great